got some breaking news. Donald Trump obviously going to surrender supposedly later today at a Manhattan courthouse, but there are protests gathered there. There are some members of Congress there as well. Marjorie Taylor Greene was giving a speech. I've seen that Jamal Bowman is there. And we actually have a reporter on the ground for the Hill. Zach Schonfeld is there. And Zach, thank you so much for joining us. What are you seeing?
Good afternoon. It has been a chaotic scene here outside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse as large crowds of protesters and a swarm of media and law enforcement await the arrival of former President Trump. We are expecting him to arrive now only in a matter of minutes, where he will surrender to Manhattan District Attorney's Office, be brought inside 100 Center Street, and eventually appear on the 15th floor at 2:15 p.m., where he will appear before a judge and formally be charged with the indictment from the grand jury last week. Now, the scene here outside this morning has remained peaceful, but it has been chaotic at times. As you were mentioning, we've seen a few lawmakers come over here outside the courthouse, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jamal Bowman, even Representative George Santos made a brief appearance. So a chaotic scene here as we await former President Trump's arrival.
Is it a lot of, so describe the ratio, is it mostly protesters who are pro-Trump? At one point it sounded like maybe they were actually outnumbered by the number of media people there are. I gather that's not quite true now. What's the ratio of like pro-Trump people to anti-Trump people to media?
Sure. So this morning, the media were really outnumbering the protesters, but the crowd has been growing over time. Protesters, we saw some of the first protesters really arriving around 9 a.m. Or so today. It culminated in a rally at 10:30. That's when Marjorie Taylor Greene showed up. So at this point, it does seem relatively even between pro-Trump and anti-Trump demonstrators. The park behind me, they've split into two sections. It's a little hard to see behind me, but there is a metal barricade going down the middle. So on one side are anti-Trump protesters, and on the other side are pro-Trump protesters. Now, some have gone between throughout the day, but for the most part, they are separated by those barriers. So things, generally speaking, seem relative, but it has been a constantly changing equation throughout the day as protesters and lawmakers come in and out. But we are getting pretty close here to the big moment of the former president's arrival.
Zach, how on earth are people being separated by those barricades? Are police involved in assessing what team somebody is rooting for and moving them to one side or the other? And what general role are the cops playing here? The Post reported clashes between protesters and cops. Is that overstating things?
I personally haven't seen any major clashes between protesters and police. Now, there have been some scuffles here and there. Earlier this morning, some anti-Trump protesters put out a huge banner along the ground that had some anti-Trump messaging, and a pro-Trump protester wearing a MAGA hat actually just dove on top of that banner. So there have been a few things here and there, but generally speaking, it has been peaceful. Now, that's not to say it's been chaotic. Police all morning now into the afternoon have been moving people around, have been giving very loud commands and telling people to move around as the security posture continues to rapidly change. So generally speaking, I would say it's peaceful, but there have been some smaller isolated incidents here and there.
My understanding is people had trouble hearing Marjorie Taylor Greene's speech because there were a lot of whistles. And then it turned out actually that the whistle distributor is a pro-Trump person who didn't know Marjorie Taylor Greene was trying to speak. Is that accurate? Were you aware of that situation going on?
I was in the middle of all the whistles. I will tell you, I was in the big mob earlier with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I did not hear anything she said because it was being drowned out by at least a dozen, if not more, whistles around me. I didn't see who exactly was giving them out, but certainly her appearance was drowned out. When she came here to the park across the street from the courthouse, she was instantly swarmed by just dozens, if not hundreds, of protesters and media who tried to get around her. Now, at one point, Congressman Jamal Bowman, who was here, saw that Marjorie Taylor Greene had showed up, and he actually tried to get into the middle of that large crowd around her. And he told me afterwards that he did not really get to engage with her. I'm not sure if they had any interaction at all, but he said that she wasn't really interested in speaking with him. So her appearance definitely was drowned out by those whistles.
Yeah, it seems that he was telling people on the scene that he thought that Marjorie Taylor Greene should go back to her own district. On the flip side of things, Jamal Bowman has been making a lot of these kind of confrontations, one-on-ones with Republican lawmakers, recently having a bit of a showdown in Congress over the recent gun tragedy in Nashville.
That's not his district either, is it?
Case in point, although it happened in D.C.
Fine.
Although it is a national issue, one could argue. I do think that there is potentially a pattern emerging here of him trying to make some political moments happen, shall we say, through these head-to-heads. What else can you tell us about the mood of the crowd? What kinds of things are they saying on both sides of this? Are people really speaking to the underlying charges very much? Do they feel like it's a political witch hunt? What do the counter-protesters and the protesters respectively say on the ground today?
Yeah, so those supporting Trump have told me on and on today about how they felt this was a political persecution and all of that. Now, not too many people are getting into the specifics of the allegations that we believe this indictment surrounds, that being the 2016 hush payment that was made to adult film star Stormy Daniels. But a lot of pro-Trump demonstrators out here today say they see this as political persecution. They have said all sorts of things about District Attorney Alvin Bragg to me in interviews throughout the day. But one interesting thing is a few of the protesters specifically tried to make clear to me that they see themselves as different than those who came to hear Trump speak back on January 6th. I've spoken to a few protesters who have made clear to me that they've told me they weren't insurrectionists, they would not go to January 6th, but they are here because they feel that he is being politically persecuted in order to stop his 2024 campaign. Now, on the other side, it's just about the exact opposite. I think there's a lot of celebration here among some of these anti-Trump demonstrators who seem to have been waiting for this for a long time, and they just seem to be a celebratory mood. So it really is interesting as you go from one side to the other, as you go from celebration just to anger.
It's very interesting that there's a self-awareness, perhaps, on the pro-Trump people that if they let things, get too out of hand, that they might not want to have a January 6th repeat for their own sakes because, obviously, Trump didn't pardon those people en masse or anything like that. They are being prosecuted. Is there any resentment about that among these protesters? What is their feelings or relationship to that kind of the riot that broke out? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the few people who have spoken to me about it, like I said, they have been clear to me that they want to make themselves stand out from those, but also at the same time, some of these protesters who I've talked to, I was asking them if this case proceeds down to trial, if this is the only time that we're going to see them protesting, or if they intend to come back here to 100 Center Street in Lower Manhattan. And a lot of the people I've been talking to tell me that this is just the beginning. They're intending to come back as many times as it takes. Now, they keep stressing to me that they want to make sure that this is peaceful. The rally that Marjorie Taylor Greene came to earlier today that was organized by the New York Young Republicans Club, in the announcement for that rally, they really emphasized that it was peaceful. So like I said, it's a chaotic scene here, but it does seem to be peaceful and a very different scene from what we've seen among some of these protests and riots in years past.
Oh, it's so good to talk to you, Zach. I'm really interested to see how this continues to evolve over the day after Trump arrives. How long is he expected to be in the building for the arraignment?
Not very long. It could be a few hours potentially. I'm actually getting ready here right now to go inside the courthouse as he prepares to arrive. Now, we do expect him to go through a few steps. He'll get his fingerprints taken, he'll be processed, and then eventually walk down the 15th floor into that courtroom. So in terms of the exact timing, that's a little unclear, but we're probably looking at, 1, 2, 3 hours, not too much more than that. And we do expect him, once he leaves the courthouse, to pretty much immediately return back home before then.
Mm. Well, we'll look forward to further reporting from you on that. Thank you, Zach, so much for joining us, and get into that courtroom.
Good to be with you.